Impossible odds is an oxymoronic phrase. The fact that odds exist at all means that something is not a 100% statistical certainty. But that doesn't mean teams on either side of those odds play like they don't exist. The favorites have swagger and confidence and skill, knowing that the odds favor them. The underdogs probably have the sympathy of the viewership, but not much else. All these things notwithstanding, the Stanley Cup playoffs don't care whether you're the juggernaut top dog or the feel-good story underdog. The Blue Jackets know it, and the Lightning know it. The Flyers know it, and the Bruins know it. The Maple Leafs know it, and the Red Wings know it. Every team has known it at one point, on the right side of history, or otherwise. They know that victory isn't awarded by the size of the dog in the fight, but by the size of the fight in the dog. Let's start with the obvious top dog, the Detroit Red Wings. This was the club of winners. They beat opponents in every way possible, through electrifying skill, through overpowering defense, through sheer grit, and through clutch goaltending. I mean, there's not much more I can say about these Wings teams that hasn't already been said in my video on them and their rivalry with the Avalanche, but one way they would have to learn to win in this series would be through injuries. Because, as you may have noticed, there is a very, very big name that's not on this list. Steve Yzerman would only play single-digit minutes of this game before leaving the series due to injury. However, if you're going to lose your number one center, you could do a lot worse for replacements than Sergei Fedorov or Igor Larionov. The funny thing is, the turn-of-the-century Detroit teams never really had ridiculously potent offensive seasons, as evidenced by the fact that nobody here even has 80 points. Their all-around game was just so well-oiled and complete that it didn't really seem like they had any kind of weakness. Well, almost any weakness. Since a certain team relocated to the West in '96, the only times the Red Wings had lost in the playoffs were to them, the Avalanche. But the trade-off, obviously, is that they won 2 back-to-back cups in dominating fashion. We take the bad with the good. Their West Coast counterpart is the obvious underdog. The 7-seeded Kings were basically just a 7 seed, but all you have to do is make it to the dance, as they say. After all, in the season set, the teams had 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 tie. Could be wide open for all we know. The Kings' point-scoring leader was the eternally underrated Ziggy Palffy, who was so good he actually got Selke votes that year. His winger opposite was the gorgeous Luc Robitaille, who scored an identical amount, and had a season points total that was his highest since '93. A lot of good things happened for the Kings that year. At 29, Brian Smolinski was in his prime with the Kings, after being bandied around the Eastern Conference despite being a first-round pick in 1990. As the 0-1 season neared its end, the Kings traded for an upgrade in net, giving up a third-round pick for Felix the Cat Potvin, an instant upgrade over his predecessor Jamie Storr, but somehow that's only the second most impactful trade the Kings made this season. Because last up for the Kings is not Rob Blake, as you might expect. He was traded to the Avalanche along with Steve Reinprecht for defenseman Aaron Miller and the one and only Adam Deadmarsh. A fantastic power forward with the coolest name in the business to boot. There are quite a few people who could have made this last spot. Matthew Schneider, Joseph Stumple, but Deadmarsh seems to be the most appropriate. Here's why. Adam Deadmarsh and Aaron Miller were on each of those Avalanche teams that the Red Wings had lost to in the last decade. Of course, they're only 2 players, but it's just a really funny coincidence that a remnant of those teams, which apparently were the only ones that could stop the Red Wings, found its way into facing them again, playing for a team almost halfway across the continent. Let's see if they can keep that trend going. Now for some history that doesn't look so good for the Kings. After a faded run to the finals was ended by the overtime goal-gobbling 1993 Canadiens, the Kings completely fell off a cliff in the standings. They made 2 postseason appearances in the next 7 years, winning a grand total of 0 times. 2001 would be their shot to win their first playoff game in 8 years, but even that modest dream had the probability of being crushed by a team that not only had 34 times as many playoff wins than the Kings had appearances since that finals run, but also had swept them in the prior year. The Kings were not only the underdog in this series, but they were also buried under a trifecta of raw power. If they somehow defeated the Red Wings, then they'd almost certainly face Colorado in the second round, and if they even beat them, which would be a resounding success of a postseason considering their station, they would have to face the reigning West champion Dallas Stars, or whoever beat them. The road to any kind of relevance in the postseason for the 6, 7, and 8 seeds in the West was probably going to be very, very short. The Kings weren't facing an uphill battle. They were facing a cliff. The Red Wings had made mincemeat of the Kings in the playoffs last season, and of the whole Western Conference for the last half-decade, and they came out the gates knowing that this year would not be any different.
Here's Figueroa, center feet shot, score! Power play goal for Detroit! Ahead at center, he'll look for Shanahan first. Shanahan gets this, there's one, center feet shot, score! Did somebody say Sergei Figueroa? Here's Shanahan, Shanahan comes in and scores!
In the blink of an eye, the Wings opened up Potvin for a 3-goal lead in the first period. In the dead puck era, that's an almost insurmountable gap. The Kings would have to believe in almost.
There's a difference between being aggressive and they score.
Bookberger wraps it around! The veteran, Kelly Bookberger!
Old man Kelly Bookberger started a comeback. Now, if you're the Wings, you're thinking that you have a lot of time left to give up the lead. But if you're the Wings, well, you're the Wings.
Lets it go, tricky shot! They respond with a Brendan Shanahan goal! And he's putting the Wings up by 3 again!
20 seconds later, the Kings were back to square one, but they still had time on their side.
Trying to get behind this Detroit defense. They do! Shot, score! What a play! Zygmunt Palffy from Joseph Stumple. And this is a steal by Palffy. Short-handed shot. What a save! Good! The paddle of the stick!
The Red Wings would match them shot for shot and goal for goal.
They need Robitaille to be loud when it comes to offense, like Palffy has been tonight. Here's Robitaille, got a lane, turn-up shot, score! He makes some noise right there, Luke Robitaille!
As much as the Kings bounced back after every goal against, that early hole was just too much to come back from. There's not much else to say about Game 1. The Kings' goals, which kinda sorta made you think they might come back, got snuffed out every time. But it was easily the Wings' game. As I mentioned before, Steve Yzerman would fracture his ankle earlier in this game and would not return for the rest of the series. Yzerman is an absolutely integral part of the team, but the injuries wouldn't stop with him. Brendan Shanahan, the leading scorer in the regular season for Detroit, broke his foot in Game 1. Down 1 superstar is a tough spot. Down 2 is a situation that would surely test the Red Wings championship-grade medal. Despite the valiant effort in Game 1 by the Kings to never give up even after every backbreaking goal, the result was still a 1-0 hole. It was expected. Nobody thought the Kings would jump out to an early lead, if they would have a series lead at all, but they did show some compete, and forced Detroit to play a full 60-minute game. Could they get the end result to match, and make the series more competitive? After all, Detroit hadn't lost in the Joe since that last Christmas, about 20 games, and not at all in the calendar year of 2001. Things were looking up for them, as usual.
It was a key part of game number 1 of that series.
An early goal by Detroit made you wonder if they'd open up another 3-goal lead. The teams traded a slew of power plays. There was barely any 5-on-5 time to speak of in the first.
5 seconds left to play. Here's Tippett trying to break it. 17 is Figueroa for Lidstrom. Towards the front, and it was tipped by Lidstrom. It's back to made it out good. Shot, score!
The Red Wings made sure to punish LA physically as well. Detroit was criminally unlucky to only be up by 2 after 20. The Kings regrouped in the intermission and slowed the game down, but still couldn't do enough to close the gap. It wasn't very familiar territory for Adam Deadmarsh to be losing to Detroit, and he wasn't about to go quietly.
Heavy duty hit
Heck, it did something, because Detroit got a 5-minute major for retaliating. And the way Deadmarsh went into the boards here, I think he's really lucky he wasn't badly hurt. But try as they might, they just couldn't get any good looks past Detroit's masterful penalty kill. Now frustration was starting to set in for the Kings. Every one of them seemed to be a step behind the play because their head was up looking for a Red Wing to light up with a hit. Potvin at least kept his head in the game, which meant the Red Wings weren't home free yet. To start the third, Kirk Maltby tried to fulfill his dream of becoming an orthodontist during play. That put his team short-handed. But again, the Wings completely neutered Los Angeles' man advantage. And Osgood stood tall as the Kings mounted a furious effort.
Over the glass and into the crowd. Take out by Carolina. Here's Murray trying to break in. Murray shot wide. The Kings get to it. Rather methodical now. Turnover in the zone. Here's Larry-Unsuccessful. Set up with the chest.
That should just about do it. Even with their captain and highest scorer out to injury, the Wings just kept rolling.
Schneider to get a stick on it. Now he lost the stick. Draper backhander stuck on Potvin. Take him up to another chance now. Put the record point. Chilio's shot is wide enough. And McCarty is wide. This should be his Norris Trophy season. Murphy, long shot. Got through, score! Tipped in front.
It was no big deal, especially not for Sergei Fedorov or Igor Larionov rising to the occasion. Not only were the Red Wings up 2-0, in the last 12 games away from the Joe, as they were going to be for at least the next 2, they hadn't lost once. Los Angeles had lost their last 13 playoff games straight up. The can-do effort that seemed to permeate their Game 1 seemed to be worthless now, as they were on the verge of becoming just another disappearing Kings team. Dire straits for the Kings. If they couldn't jump on the Red Wings even while they were the healthier team, the series could end up being very, very short. The first game of the playoffs in front of your home crowd is usually a pretty hectic, energized affair for the home team. But for the Kings, Game 3 was a pretty low-event game.
Dandino with his feet moving again. Kings come up with it, trying to create something. Here's Belanger, centering pass. It's hit for Ross. He scored! A bullet drive home on the tie, and the Kings finally have a lead.
On top of the fact that not much footage exists for it, everyone seems kind of sluggish on the ice. Even the camera guy. Like, dude, can you zoom in a little? Follow the play a bit more?
Here comes the Kazlov out in front. Lidstrom with a catch. He scored! It won't be a power play goal on the score sheet, but it might as well be. Here sends it across. Adam Deadmarsh trying to use his speed to get around Dandino. Osgood down. Now the net's on.
At least the announcers were into the game.
Seconds on the first penalty. Here's a drive by Dandino, but his back comes to Larionov. And a glove saved by Potvin. Baby.
And despite everyone in the stadium standing around, players or crew, Felix Potvin was absolute money.
Closing seconds of the penalty against Selke, so Kings are back at full.
The boost he gave would be exactly what the Kings needed if they were going to get back in this series.
Flips over the stick of Kazlov. Coffey sets it up here.
A late third period goal in front of your home crowd. What more could you ask for? But they still had to close out the game against a far better team.
Lidstrom winds up, gets one man down, sends it to the net. Loose puck now covered by the LA goaltender.
You know, these days would look a lot cooler if the camera was actually manned. There we go. The N-board's cam never lets you down. The Kings won their first playoff game in 15 attempts. That's a terrible stat, but it might be a sign that the Kings' fortunes were starting to change. But for them to have a shot, the Wings' fortunes would have to change as well. With Shanahan and Yzerman still out injured, all the Kings' defensive attention went to Sergei Fedorov. The Kings came out swinging. But the Red Wings matched them blow for blow.
He gets it up the center ice, but Deadmarsh now to Ziggy Potvin. Potvin coming in, he shoots, save Osgood, and he covers up. Boucher's pass up to Robitaille. He tipped it out to center, and Tom Gill sends it right back across the line. Here is Norris shooting and a save made. Rebound, save again by Potvin.
A bad penalty saw the better team take the lead.
To Lidstrom. Lidstrom shoots, save, and Holmstrom couldn't get to it. Loose puck, score! Verbeek put it in. Potvin was down on the ice, and Pat Verbeek banked it off him into the net.
You'd be forgiven for wincing at this point and thinking, well, here it comes. The Kings would try to capitalize on the power play.
Play, Boucher holds it in. Gets it back on the right side to Falcon. Now to Schneider. Schneider shoots, save, rebound, in front. Harvey shot. Cleared out to center ice. Another clean to the right side. Held in by Emerson. Up the middle.
But they too would come up fruitless to end the first. The Red Wings would try to get the ball rolling on their own man advantage.
Selke fed up in front. Almost Verbeek didn't get it. Shot by Lidstrom. Save, rebound, another save by Potvin. And a penalty.
He's going to call Felix Potvin for taking an extra shot.
Felix Potvin would send his team down 2 men and pay the price.
In the series, Detroit's had a 2-man advantage. There's a score by Duchesne. They won the face-off, and Duchesne makes it 2-0 to Lariana. Into Kozlov. They got a point in front of him. Kozlov to the point. He scores! Another power play goal, and Detroit leads 3-0.
Okay, so maybe this game is a wash. And if that's the case, this series suddenly ain't looking that close. The one win the Kings had scraped out to this point was a nail-biter, but the Red Wings had run roughshod over them in the other 3. At this point, does the series really seem that close? What's more, the Red Wings' goals tonight had been scored with purpose, off of skill plays, the kind that generally disappears in the tooth-and-nail playoff format. The Kings didn't have much hope, but they had to make it respectable. An immediate power play gave them the chance to, but they squandered it.
No real threat to the Kings on that power play. The 2-on-1 developing right side pass to LePerrier, and it's just tipped away. Osgood reached out to get his stick on it. LePerrier again into the corner. Gets an error in Miller. Miller's pass high in the air. Knocked down by Robitaille. And hit the post. It got behind Osgood and hit the left goal post.
And they got another power play. Not a single shot.
And that's going to do it. The Kings are going to fail on yet another power play. They get no shots on this man advantage.
A statistic that started to get bandied about at this point was that since the Kings' '98 series against St. Louis, they had gone 0 for 50 on the power play. Ouch. And the Wings wouldn't even allow the Kings to muster so much as a decent scoring chance to end the period. The Wings also did a masterful job of freezing the puck in the D-zone to draw whistles and slow down the game, suffocating the Kings and their crowd.
Finally, play is whistle dead.
But their netminder came up clutch exactly when he needed to.
Right down the middle, backhand with a save, the rebound is wide. Lead. Tipped away, Kings with it. Right side, Smolinski. In front of it, he shoots, saved by Osgood. Got his right skate out to make the save. Good chance for Smolinski, and Osgood comes up big again.
The Wings forced another 3 whistles in the final minute before the second period mercifully ended. Now, psychologically, intermission can do one of 2 things to a trailing team. It's either a period for them to mentally reset and put the pedal to the metal during the next frame, or a chance to have that one hope get absolutely trucked if they allow a goal against. Which would the Kings do?
Schneider shoots, tipped and wide. But comes around the right point. Garlotti with a shot wide. Held in though. Norris with a backhand. Hit from Robitaille. Save made by Osgood.
Though they just couldn't beat the Wings, who, while it appeared they were being outplayed, still seemed so calm and cool and collected. Psychological warfare, perhaps. The Red Wings just continued to whittle away time, freezing the puck, knocking off the net, anything to prevent the Kings from sustaining offense. Martin Lapointe committed a slashing penalty with just over 6 minutes left, and, if there's even any doubt how this game is going to turn out, the Kings have to at least start making the Wings sweat a little.
Players so quick, always fresh on the ice on the PK. Schneider shoots, save, rebound, in front, score! Robitaille and Stumble were there.
Well, there's a start. Scott Thomas ruined Osgood's shutout bid off one of the most blitzkrieg-y face-offs I have ever seen. But hey, if you want bread, go to the bakery. If you want goals, go to the net. And if you want comeback,
Healthy up the middle, Smolinski, and a 3:30 left to go, third period. Up along the left wing boards, Robitaille trying to dig it out, and a penalty to Detroit.
Well, it looks like the Kings, they're going to pull the goaltender right here. So Felix Potvin has been pulled. All or nothing right here. And they're going with that same type of look. Deadmarsh is on the ice, but so is Scott Thomas. Kings going to try to pass the net.
22, when they pull Potvin. Puck comes over to Smolinski. Down the right's up the middle. Boucher shoots. Just tipped wide to the left. Picked up by Robitaille. Around the right side to Blake Boucher. Shoots. Save. Rebound sent just wide again. After the save by Osgood. Held in Schneider. Goal in front. Robitaille couldn't get a good angle. Now behind the net for Stumble. Stumble tried to throw it in front. Did he score? Their left light is on. The Kings say they score.
Only Stumple and Schneider see this puck go in, but soon a video review would absolve them. The puck just hit pay dirt. But lost in the frenzy, they still trail by 1.
Now it's center ice, Robitaille. Sends it left side. Scott Thomas shoots. Save. Rebound just wide. Thomas could have tied it. Down along the left side. Potvin heads for the bench. Kings hold it in. To Robitaille. Tipped away and off the glass. Not clear. Smolinski in front. 1 minute left to go in regulation. Kings have the extra attack around. Left side pass up the middle. Smolinski scores. The Kings have tied it. The Kings have tied it. Smolinski scores. It's 3-3.
Some things are just inevitable. This comeback certainly did not feel so until maybe 2 minutes prior, but you're never more than 1 shot away from scoring, and the Kings made all 3 count. But they hadn't won yet. The deafening Staples Center crowd sent the Kings into overtime rejuvenated, and the Red Wings deflated.
It'll be sudden death overtime. The Kings rally with 3 goals in the third. Thomas, Stumble, and Smolinski.
Some things don't end the way you think they will. Some things see the expected winner unsurprisingly win. But some things are just inevitable.
Chelios to Kittle, taken away by Denmark. Denmark goes in front. The Kings win in overtime.
Eric Belanger popped the bottle on Game 4, which I am adopting as an idiom that equates to stick a fork in it, but for hockey. The play was made possible by the forecheck of none other than Adam Deadmarsh. Maybe Deadmarsh just got lucky. Maybe he was just in the right place at the right time. But I'd like to think that he recognized something in the Wings' D-zone setup that he had seen from his days in Colorado, and that wily old coot knew exactly where he had to go to get the puck to the net. It was a brand new series, but through 240-plus minutes of playing time, it didn't exactly look it. The Wings had led in this series for eons, and the Kings barely at all. And those stats don't even demonstrate how the Kings barely eked out their 2 wins, or conversely, how much the Wings dominated theirs at the Joe. And the Joe is where these 2 teams would return for the always pivotal Game 5. Given the context of the Kings' comeback, Brendan Shanahan pulled himself off the injured shelf, saying that it was just too important of a game to miss. The Kings had been able to stay afloat without having to face either Yzerman or Shanahan in front of their home crowd. But without either of those 2 variables, hopes for Game 5 were a lot more stringent. And yet, it's a good thing hockey players are mentally stronger than you and I are, because 1 minute in,
Make something happen here tonight. A lead pass, score!
but again, 60 seconds of play made all the difference.
And then Palffy puts it through Osgood to make a 1-0 early in the 2nd minute of this game.
The opening minutes of the next period would bear fruit as well, but from an unlikely hero.
He goes. Feeds it in, right in on goal. Belanger scores. Lapierre gets the goal. Belanger made the move.
Had it been the Wings that had jumped out to a 2-0 lead, this game likely would have seen the same suffocating, slow-it-down defense they'd employed when they had the lead prior. But this game was the Kings to spearhead.
Corner. Shot at the line with a shot. Right on. Rebound, score. How about that for a start?
Then Dino beats Nordstrom to the puck. The Kings never get it back.
But one tough break for Potvin saw Detroit have that deficit all the same.
That's high and wide of the goal and cleared on the glass and out. 2-on-1. Whitmarsh is open on the other side. And there's the shot. And what a play that was. The LA Kings.
It was all falling apart for the Red Wings. There's that man again. Deadmarsh gave the Kings some breathing space. At this point, the prospect of losing 3 straight games and facing elimination loomed large over an increasingly desperate Detroit team.
Deadmarsh coming in. Stumble in front. Oh, what a great save by Osgood.
Osgood did his part to keep Detroit's hopes alive.
LA changing. Shanahan digs in. Good on the brakes. Centering pass down to the line. Chelios scores! They are back in it again. How about that? Shanahan.
7:15 left, only down by 1. For a legendary team like the Wings, that's peanuts. But with Brendan Shanahan leaving the game to injury again, everything together was just too much for the Wings.
This is the first loss here at Joe Louis Arena for the Red Wings since December the 27th when Minnesota...
The Kings had come all the way back against an incredibly legendary Red Wings team. The Red Wings hadn't lost in the first round since falling to the Sharks in 1994. Winning one game at a time is no tall order for them. The Kings had momentum on their side, and possibly a little bit of luck as well. But luck doesn't last forever, especially not in the playoffs. Everything would come to a head in Game 6, with either the Kings finally capping off an incredible comeback and upset, or the Wings snuffing out the Kings' momentum and bringing it back for a Game 7.
They move on to face Colorado.
Priority 1 for the Kings was to fire salvo after salvo at Osgood.
Puck very important to gain possession. Trailer, Boucher shoots! Just deflected wide. Held in there by Deadmarsh. Deadmarsh for the Kings on the power play. It's got 35 seconds left. Here's Selke walking in. He shoots and scores! An early goal for the Kings as Stumble walked in the left side.
But a power play for them immediately after would send their first-in-the-league unit to work. Nothing came of it, and the Kings would do their best to make them pay.
Walks in front, down, shoots! Save! Osgood, and he covers up.
After finally ending the 0-for-50 power play streak with their prior goal, the Kings gave Detroit everything they could handle.
Goal. The Kings had 2 men, Deadmarsh and Stumble. Pass to Palpy, right wing side. Palpy cutting in, shoots! Save by Osgood. Deep, that's behind the net. Overtime gets knocked down. In the middle of Smolinski, Palpy, Schneider, he shoots! Robitaille! Yes! It went in! Is it going to count or not? Robitaille got dumped into the net.
Finally, some controversy. After Schneider's shot destroys the left post, both the puck and Luc Robitaille are dumped into the crease. And unlike earlier in playoffs past episodes, this one's pretty cut and dry. Robitaille does in fact kick the puck in. No goal. But the Kings were still a man to the good.
Block, Schneider again. Shoot, save! Osgood. Corner, Candino had it.
Despite being suffocated in the first half of the period, the Red Wings course corrected, both slowing the game down and keeping the Kings sufficiently far enough from Osgood.
Smolinski across the line, but he runs into Glenn Murray, and the puck cleared back into the Kings zone.
Their methodical effort saw the period end with only 2 further shots from either team.
Throws it up the middle, taken away, and back come the Red Wings. 47 seconds to go in the first period. Draper driving down the right side around Schneider. Draper shoots, save, rebound, shot up high by Verbeek.
1-0 Kings. The Red Wings were 40 minutes away from being eliminated. But in this game at least, they were trending in the right direction.
Makes a shot. Right side, shot from there, save, rebound is saved by Potvin.
And a little help from the officiating never hurt anyone. I really don't know about this call, man. I mean, Holmstrom had been flopping all game, so I'm inclined to think that this is another one. Or maybe the refs just feared the Grim Reaper. Either way.
Another chance. Puck rolls in front, and tipped in and the game is tied.
Talk about ugly. But with all the injuries Detroit was dealing with, ugly goals might be the only ones they could rely on. This puck hits, I think, Joseph Stumple along the half-boards and absolutely trundles into the net somehow. Not a single soul touched it until it got to Potvin. What do we call this? A lucky bounce? A lucky trundle? A deconstructed postmodern play? Whatever you call it, the Red Wings could not ask for a better goal to sow the seeds of doubt in the Kings' heads. The better team, the team expected to win, getting a fluky goal almost feels like you're fated to lose to an underdog.
Tipped away, Red Wings wrap around, McCarty shoots, he scores! And the Red Wings lead 2-1.
And when they take the lead from outplaying the underdog, that feels inevitable. Darren McCarty's 10,000th clutch goal of his career put his team ahead. The momentum was all Red Wings, and given how effective they'd been at arresting the Kings' momentum, they had all the confidence in the world. So the Kings just couldn't find their footing.
In front, tipped wide by Smolinski. Murray's pass, brought to center by Aaron Miller. He gives it to Glenn Murray. Tipped away at the blue line and offside. Scott Thomas. A minute and a half left to go here in this second period. Scott Thomas across the line. Figueroa comes back to kick it away.
They just needed one goal, one shot to get back in it.
He shoots, and it's deflected.
If it came at all, it would have to come in the third period. No matter what happens to finish this series, be it in this game or the next, the Kings have put forth an effort that far surpassed their expectations. Even forcing a Game 7 against Detroit shows incredible spunk. But there's one LA skater who doesn't just force further games against Detroit.
Just deflected wide by Deadmarsh.
He wins them.
Deadmarsh behind the net to Palpy. Palpy to Deadmarsh, shoots wide. Now to Kelly Brookberger. Brookberger right side, shoots, save, rebound, knocked away again.
Playing against Superman, in one man's blood, still flows a little bit of kryptonite. That man is Adam Deadmarsh.
Norris right side and rolls it out. Osgood a shot, score! Deadmarsh ties the game!
Joseph Stumple's terrific second effort to push this puck forward somehow got the puck to Deadmarsh, who times his swing perfectly as the puck hits the ice. But there's still 10 minutes left. Anything can happen in 10 minutes, including an incredibly clutch and successful team shrugging off back-breaking goals.
He gets knocked down. And a shot and a save. Knocked it down. McCarty slow getting up. Shot in front. Tipped and a save. Robitaille was right in front. Osgood. He makes the save. Clears it out to center. And Figueroa trying to get to it. He got knocked down. And Potvin covers it up. Back to get it with a minute 25 to go in regulation. Here's Loriano. On the backhand up high. Miller. Miller throws it in front. Save. Palpy. Who put it in? Saved by Osgood with 24 and 8/10 seconds to go.
And then there was no time left at all. The series' second overtime game could very well be its last.
But the Kings tied it on a goal by Adam Deadmarsh.
But unlike Game 4, these teams did not ride into sudden death on a tidal wave of energy and momentum. Both of them had slogged their way through half a period of conservative defense and agonizingly bad misplays to get there. And watching along, you had the feeling that the victor would be the first team to successfully set up just one skillful play.
Nice out of reach of Philippe Boucher and picked up Stumple's pass. Sent by the wings into the Kings zone. It's going to be icing against Detroit. Puck taken by Loriano. Left side, his pass. Here's Ziggy Palpy. Palpy to the blue line. Palpy to Deadmarsh, but offside. Knocked down. Kings to center. Here's Glenn Murray. Murray, Detroit zone. Shoots. Tipped on the play. Takes his time. Makes the play up the middle. Miller to center ice. Here is Stumple. Right side. Stumple shoots. Save. Rebound. Score! The Kings win! Adam Deadmarsh wins it! The Kings have won the series! Detroit is eliminated! Adam Deadmarsh eliminates the Red Wings! The Kings, in overtime, have pulled the upset!
For 2 games, the Detroit Red Wings were world beaters. But the killer instinct that had so long been a trademark of their success was epitomized by their opponent at all the wrong times. Winners of 4 straight, the Kings had done the unthinkable and defeated Detroit. And in a sense, they had beaten them at their own game, with star power shining through at every gap and at every turning point in the series. And they had more than a little bit of help from Adam Deadmarsh, the right man in the right place, who knew a thing or two himself about unseating Hockeytown.
As a story, last year the story, a huge story, was the power play effectiveness of the Detroit Red Wings.